welcome to another episode of Reasonably Tactical. I'm Marty, and with me is John, as always.
Hello.
Got a lot of real good feedback from our initial episode from people all over the country, and I think the only complaint was from some old, crusty warrant officers that, wish they still had a Beretta in their pistol belt. Besides that, it was all positive.
But what's funny is that I did go out and buy a 19 Gen 5.
There you go.
After that conversation. I guess it was real quick. It was one of those things that out of all the pistols I've owned over the years, that's the one pistol I've never actually owned. I've shot them. I've played with them. I've worked on them for friends. I've never owned one. And it was kind of like a travesty. So I was like, all right, fine. Time to say goodbye to the Hellcat Pro.
Take that step into being a better person. That's what it boils down to. Well, today we're going to talk about the main focus is going to be about some first aid stuff. Stop the bleeding, things you can do everyday life. Just and we'll give some scenarios of how it can be used. But we had a number of people reach out asking for kind of my thoughts on the recent shootings. So we're not going to dive into statistics and numbers and all that stuff because we can debate that for days. But just kind of my 2 cents on it. And it is something that hits kind of close to home. Going back to 1998, I was a senior in high school in Burlington when we had the Burlington 5. We had right before Thanksgiving, we had the 5 students that were planning on coming into the high school, taking over. They had their list, they had their plan and everything. Fortunately, one of their, I don't know if his friend or girlfriend called it in, and police were able to interdict them before it happened. Right. So, definitely a success back then.
Yeah.
What's unfortunate is we're at 15 shootings this year so far. Yeah. That's almost one a week. That just blows my mind. And we keep hearing, everybody pointing fingers. Well, it's because of this ideology or this political motive or and there's no shoe that fits. We got to stop trying to categorize people and put people into a mold. The common thread here is mental health.
Agreed. I was reading something, and again, not going to go all statistics or political on people, but SSRIs seem to be a very big common factor among a lot of these, which leads to mental health. And, I'll let you take off a little bit more on that since you've seen that kind of firsthand with what you experienced in the military.
Yeah. And, I got friends that have struggled in the military and out, but they're aware of, their struggles and, they've gotten help. And also it's like being that strong support network. If you know somebody's struggling, get them help. If you know they're to that threshold of where they could potentially hurt themselves or someone else, you need to report it. Like you have to. As much as you want to be their friend or their buddy, you have to take those steps to prevent stuff like this happening. And I've had to do it, with my own family before. I had a family member about a year ago who was really struggling and had to really take a step back and prioritize them to get them the help. And the help was amazing. It was like a 6-week program. I was able to drive them to their sessions every day, and it worked miracles, complete 180.
And that's exactly it. I remember my high school years too. Oh, we're just going to give you this pill and we're going to give you this other pill to help you with this. And we're like, but I don't need it. And my brother, thank God. And Paul, if you're watching, thank you for speaking up because he actually confronted my parents about it and said, he doesn't need this.
Yeah, you're going down a slippery slope and this could have residual effects. And that's what people don't understand. If we just mask issues with pills that you might not even need.
Right.
What's the second, third effects of that?
Right. And the thing that struck me as odd was I didn't feel any better on the pills. If anything, I felt more disconnected from reality, more detached. And I put my hand up right away and said, this is not right. This is not what I like. And this is not a feeling that I am seeking in life. I don't want to be detached from reality. I want to just not feel awkward. And then I realized, well, that's being a teenager.
Right. And that's, it's, I think the time has come for us to stop looking to DC at the national level to solve all our problems. And I think a lot of this can be solved at the community level. As a parent of 2 teens, all I can say is know your kids and their friends. Like create that trust. So if they see something, they have concerns, they come to you. Get involved with school. Find out from the school, hey, do you have a plan? If their plan is solely some alarm system, okay, that's not going to cut it because once that alarm goes off, what's the next step? Who's coming? Where do we link up with our kids when when they've been cleared. If you don't have kids, just as a community member, talk with your law enforcement.
Right.
Find out if there's anything you can do to help. Find out what their plan is. Find out if they have the capabilities to deal with it, and then that's something you got to push on your, local leadership to make sure they have the resources they need. I've had instances on the law enforcement side. People have a misconception of, we've gotten into the last couple of years on law enforcement are not mental health specialists, which is true. We're not. We get a couple hour class on exposure to mental health, but that's it. The big push is to have these counselors or social workers. Well, there's still a huge disconnect, and people don't understand it is when that call goes out, we're still the first ones there. And I've had two that really stick out in my mind. We had a attempted suicide by cop. Sub-freezing weather, so I was already unhappy that I was out there in the sub-freezing weather. But this lady, when me and a deputy showed up there, made it clear that someone was dying today, either her or us. 5 foot nothing, 60 years old, 100 pounds soaking wet, and it took 6 of us to restrain her. Like she was having that big of a mental episode. 6 hours later, after she had been sedated by the ER doctor, the social worker shows up and is like, "Well, she's fine now. Let her go." And it's like, what? But you didn't see her when she was having her episode.
It doesn't make any sense.
I've had another one where, a juvenile that unfortunately we've interacted with numerous times who becomes violent. The family calls. We show up there and, defuse the situation. Social workers don't even show up. They'll call in over the phone. So, yes, we are getting these things in place, but it's still not cutting it. We have to do better in your local community. And if you're aware of this, bring it up to your local leadership and make those changes.
Well, I think that's one of those gray areas too. I mean, without again delving too deep into this, is you have that immediate emotional response to any of this. And I'm sorry if you don't have an emotional response one way or another to this. There's something seriously wrong with you. And I think the problem is that I don't know how it is that a school can get involved in some ways with a teen almost a little too much. And yet in other things where it does matter and you can work on something and prevent something before it happens, they're kind of hands off. You're right. Getting involved in the community seems to make the most sense with that.
Yeah, and the last thing I just want to add, and, everybody's an armchair quarterback, and it's usually the people that with the least experience are the loudest, picking apart stuff.
Right.
But I just want to say, I think it was a day or two after the Nashville incident, I watched it, and that should be the standard. Law enforcement across the nation, that should be the standard. That officer got on scene, grabbed his rifle without any issue, got inside, started clearing rooms until he heard gunfire, and he moved the sound of gunfire and eliminated the threat. That needs to be the set standard.
Right.
I've seen just stuff that would break your heart, and that's the way people are trained. If you live in an area where, I no kidding, know of SWAT teams that will sit there and tell you in your face, that's not their responsibility. A school shooting, an active shooter is not the responsibility. That's as wrong as you can be. Yeah. And whatever leadership has allowed that to happen probably shouldn't be in those positions.
Well, and, it's interesting you say that because I was part of the original school shooting scenario, like the first one in the country, which was Sheriff Hausner at the time. He was the one that kind of put it together with the local area law enforcement agencies. We did it at Williams Bay. I was one of the victims that were there. And what we learned in that, even though it was done in double time, so 20 minutes, which really would have been broke down into 40 minutes, I believe, was one of those situations where so much was gained from that one scenario, that practice run, that people actually had a chance to understand, okay, how long does it take SWAT to get on site? How long does it take somebody to breach the building? What could happen in that time frame? And it's sad that here we are 20 years later going, well, what do we do? And it's like, what do you mean?
This has been done before. You have organizations out there that do this professionally. And I think it goes back again to what we talked about last time is you have people that are intimidated and threatened by other experience, so they push it away rather than swallowing their pride and listening to what others can input to make their agency better. Because at the end of the day, this is about not only making your organization better, but it's about making the community that you serve better. That's why we just want to start off with this quick conversation to kind of highlight, hey, these are my thoughts. These are what you as a parent or as a community member can do to help. But end of the day, like we said, nobody's coming, so this is why you need to train. So we're about to head into the fight room and start some first aid training.
Sounds great. Let's do it. Let's go.
All right, so one of the big things people brought up to me, and one of their stressors is when they see somebody in a medical emergency, they just don't know what to do, and that panic sets in. So, there's a couple different thoughts here. If you're EMS, if you're EMR, EMTA, paramedic, you are bound by law to act. Everyone else, it's Good Samaritan law. So no matter what you do, you're still helping. Even if you slip up, they can't hold you accountable because you're not personally trained. At the end of the day, it's being a good human being. Be that person that tries to help, at least diffuse the situation, rather than be that jerk that pulls out the phone and starts recording. So remember, be a decent human being. So we're going to cover a couple things. First, we're going to go over some different med kits. I have what I keep in the car, what I throw in my pack when I'm hiking, and with summer coming, I like to be in gym clothes, so I still like to carry, so I still throw stuff in there. So this is what I keep in my car. It's something pretty small. You can buy the bag for like 20 bucks at any outdoor store, but this is my big kit. So inside the main pouch, I keep an emergency blanket that automatically heats once you break the seal. I keep a sand splint, somebody who has a broken bone. I keep a couple high quality chest seals because, let's face it, the majority of them don't work. They won't stick, so invest in a couple of really good ones. Always have a tourniquet. You'll see there's a redundant thing in every kit. And some Curlex. Curlex comes in all different kinds of forms, so it can be a little cube like this or it can be a big roll. Last thing, and if I have one piece of medical kit that I'd always carry on me, it's this, is an Israeli dressing. And it is an Israeli dressing, that's who made it. Many moons ago, some big army doc said, oh, you can't use Israeli dressing as a term because it might offend someone. I put these on countless Iraqis and Afghans, and guess what? Nobody was offended. And on top of that, hey, when somebody's bleeding out, political correctness doesn't really come into play. All right, on the right I have my breathing stuff. So a little mask if I have to do mouth to mouth, as well as a nasal pharyngeal, opening up the airways. Up front, a couple of miscellaneous things, some trauma shears, some eye drops, and also a little bit of tincture just in case you get a blister. And then to the left, some additional stop the bleed stuff. Like I said, different size Curlex, some Band-Aids, and some smaller butterflies. So that's my stays in the car, goes with me everywhere I go. Then I have throw in my pack. So nice little pack like this. A number of manufacturers make them pre-stocked. And this has a little bit more variety because when you're out backpacking or camping, you get little cuts and scrapes. So a lot more Band-Aids in here, some aspirin and Tylenol, just get a headache. Got my tourniquet, an old school cravat, ace bandage. Definitely need some tweezers because I end up getting all kinds of splinters and everything. And some Q-tips to clean stuff out, a little bit of different types of cleaning, aloe vera type stuff that might come in handy. And a wide variety of different types of Curlex. Last kit is my everyday carry during the summer. Like I said, I like to be in gym shorts. I like to be comfortable. So I go with a tactile fanny pack because I can keep my Glock 19 in it, but I always keep a tourniquet right inside as well. Now, two types of tourniquets. I come from way back in the day where we still were using a cravat and a stick and you had to twist it and tie it off and all that fun stuff. But then one of the great things that came from trauma medicine and the war on terror was the two types of tourniquets. You have the cat and the soft T. Both are good tourniquets. They have the pros and cons. The cat will fold down a little bit smaller, although you do have this big stick to turn. One of the downsides to it is there's a lot of counterfeits on the market that is just some cheap plastic, and if you put it on and really ratchet it down, they have been known to break. So make sure you get one that has an actual date on there, as you can see printed, the red tab, and as well as the white tab here. And like anything else, test it out. If you test it out on yourself and it breaks, you know that you bought the wrong kind. Like I said, with soft tee, a little more durable, heavy duty. It's made of metal. You don't have to worry about it breaking. Like I said, its downside is, like everything, make sure it's prepped to use, because if it's not, you try while under stress to thread this through here, it's just not going to happen. And the older models that have the little press clip, it's definitely not happening. It was a huge pain. But will hold up really well, sticks in there, and will stop bleeding. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is the MARCH acronym. So patient assessment. You come on scene, or you're at a baseball game, and someone gets hit by a ball. Like, what are you going to do? First thing, scene safety. You know, because the last thing you want to do is when you're helping someone else become a victim yourself. So at a car crash, is the car on fire? If something's burning or you smell burning, you probably want to get them out of there so that it doesn't blow up and you become a victim. Or power lines, or I mean, there's a million things that you can throw out there that could cause harm to you. So make sure the scene's safe before you start. First thing is the M, which is massive bleeding. As you walk up, if you see there's just blood spurting out of something, you need to stop that immediately. Because it doesn't matter if you have the best CPR skills in the world, you're just going to pump more blood out. You need to stop that bleeding immediately. A is airway control. So that's where you have the tilt the head method. If you've been to a basic CPR class, opening the airway, and you're going to start your breathing. Then we have respiratory support, is R. And that's, are they conscious? What's their breathing rate? Color of their skin, are their lips turning blue, fingers turning blue? And then also the symmetry of the breaths. Is the chest rising equally, or is only one side raising? These are all things that you need to take note of. Because as you call in 911, you can paint a better picture of what's going on. Then we have C, circulation. That's your actual heart, what's it doing, pumping blood through the system. And that's simple, everybody did this in first grade, the 2 fingers on the wrist, can you feel it or not? Is it racing real hard? Is it really faint? Is it uneven? These are all things to take note of. And lastly is H, and that's what we're going to focus on as well, is the hypothermia and head injury. Especially with summer coming, a lot of people kind of ignore the hypothermia thing, but when someone's going into shock and their body can't produce that heat, they can still become hypothermic. Head injuries, we hear about it all the time. A lot of effort's been going into contact sports of football and hockey, and trying to mitigate that. But the reality is, those are still low numbers on the grand scheme of things. When I was working on my master's program, focusing on head injuries, and football and hockey combined in that year were about 10,000 concussions. The leading by 80,000 a year that year was bicycling injuries. Everybody's out riding their bikes. And the problem is, you have people either don't wear helmets, or their helmet's not fitted properly, especially, think about kids riding around, and they're going 10 to 20 miles an hour when they hit that high impact, and then their head hits cement, versus, 2 people running 7 miles an hour hitting each other. So not only are there more common bicycle head injuries, but they're also like traumatic brain injury because you have that force. So just something to think about. If you're out riding around, I like to ride my bike, throw a helmet on. If your kids are out, hey, might want to put a helmet on, make sure it fits properly. All right, so first thing we're going to cover is the tourniquet. We're going to focus on the cat tourniquet. It's a little bit cheaper, a little more available on the market, so something everybody should have. All right, first thing is you want to prep it. When you come in, it's all wrapped in plastic, tied up. Sometimes it's prepped here, sometimes it's all the way down. You want to prep it to be the minimal length, and that way you have the biggest loop. The issue being is you pull it out, and you have to get it over the thigh. You don't want to be messing around trying to weave it back through and prepping it then. So just leave it prepped so that you pull it out, it's ready to go. It's always easier to cinch down if we're going on an arm like we're about to do, versus trying to re-extend it to go for the thigh. All right.
Once again, this arm here. Yes, you can see it. Yep.
So the use for this is where you have that main arterial bleeding. So it is, blood is spurting out. You can see it. We need to get this on quickly because somebody can bleed out very quickly. So it's as simple as, loop it up, try to get it closest to the joint as possible, and just cinch it down as tight as you can. You don't have to make sure or try to make it all nice and neat.
Basically, just as long as you get some resistance on
Yep,
it.
that Velcro is super strong, it's going to hold. At that point, we're going to tighten it down to the point where we stop the blood flow. Now, even if you're practicing at home, This is something that you can do. It's not going to hurt you, as long as you don't leave it on for an extended period of time. But you get a couple turns in here, and then we want to stop it right there, and it'll stow it right there. Hold a little white tab. If you have the time to write the time on it, fine. If not, it's not that important. Last thing you want to do is you want to ensure that the blood flow is stopped, so check the pulse. There's no pulse there. You right there, Layla? All right, she's gonna survive. So, there we go. Something that you can practice at home. I don't recommend doing this on your children, but you can do it to yourself, another adult. Good to go.
Makes
Get
sense.
confident with the equipment.
This is very similar to the same one I keep in my kit in my car too as well.
Okay.
These are great. These things are awesome actually. But you're right though, what you said earlier about how there's a variety of different ones out there. You just got to make sure you get the right ones.
Exactly. For demonstration purposes, reaching across, you never want to reach over the patient, but that way you guys can see what's going on.
Perfect.
All right.
What else we got?
So next, we're going to use Perlex. So this is for pressure dressing. This would be, you have a big open wound, it is bleeding, you can see blood pulling out, but it's not that spurting. This could be something where it's on a thigh, on the arm, it could be on the end of an amputated limb, horrible car crash or boating accident where there's an amputation where you can put it on the end. Probably want to put a tourniquet first, but to contain that at the end, you can still put pressure dressing. So we have Perlex in this form, as well as little cubes. I kind of like these because you pop it and then just tear it open. So what you do is, let's say she has a wound on this arm right here. You're going to take the end of it, you're going to put it in the hole and find where that blood's coming from and just put your finger over the hole. One thing to remember is you don't need to gorilla grip it to stop it because you're burning your own energy. Who knows how long you're going to have to maintain this individual. So, it can be literally just a little press of the finger will stop the bleeding.
Okay.
So, put it in, find where it is. All right, I can feel it coming out, and you'll be able to feel when it's coming out. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start packing the wound. So just keep that in there, keep that pressure on it, keep that pressure as you feed it down.
Right, because you don't know how deep that wound
Right.
is. Right.
Until it starts coming out of the wound like so, and then at that point you're gonna start wrapping it around. Once you get one or two wraps in it, what you want to do is right over where that wound is, put a twist. And as you continue to wrap, do about every other wrap, do another twist, because what that will do is it will almost be a tourniquet-like effect on there and make it tighter so that that pressure doesn't come off.
So then you do use the whole pack. You don't.
Oh
just
yeah,
sit down.
with this you're going to use the whole pack. Don't even try to save it. And then you can just kind of tuck it under itself and give it a squeeze. If you see blood starting to come up, grab another pack and wrap it again. If you have a really deep wound, one technique to do, and I learned this a long time ago from one of my medics, is take two things of Perlex, pop the first one, just shove that in there to stop it, and then use that second one to
kind of
actually
keep everything together.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Just to get that pressure on there.
It's awesome.
All right. The last one we have is the Israeli dressing. One of my favorites. So this has a sterile side, and what you would do is place it right over the wound.
Here, actually, let's show it on this side because I don't think you're going to see it. So you want me to remove this?
Yep.
Great. Okay.
All right. So last thing we have is the Israeli dressing.
You're shot. Good arm.
Yep. So once again, open wound. Place that down with the, it has a plastic bar like this, or it'll have a little hard plastic bar. You want to place that right over the wound. So as you start wrapping, you come through, and this allows you to cinch it back. Once again, and with this little bar that's on there, that'll pressure in and create that tourniquet-like
So this is almost like a 2-for-1.
Right.
Is why it was so important to like the Israeli military, the IDF at the time, because you could just use one, less to carry in your bag and everything.
Right, and it
makes sense.
does the tourniquet effect, plus it has the gauze, so it's, kind of, like I said, if I have one piece of equipment, this is what I take. And once again, do that little X over it, where that bar is, because that'll add that pressure down. And it has these nice little plastic clips on the end, so you can just clip it on itself. And just like with the pressure dressing, give it a little squeeze, no additional blood's coming out. She's good to go. Correct. Stop bleeding.
Perfect. See, this is all stuff that you can practice at home. Be ready for the unfortunate when it happens. And Marty, I can't thank you enough. And Layla, you survived.
So,
I'm alive.
Yes.
The last thing we're going to talk about this really quick is the H part, the hypothermia and the head injury once again. So, for example, last Thursday at a baseball game, it's high school, doubleheader, first game goes, no incident, second game starts, catcher takes a baseball to the throat. Goes down, gets back up, gives raises his hand, he's okay. Nobody thinks anything of it. He's catching his breath, and teenagers, they don't want to be, they're tough guys, they don't want you running out checking on them. He goes to stand up a couple minutes into it, and he collapses. So me and the dad run out there, eyes are completely dilated. As soon as we start talking, they constrict, yell for an ambulance. And here he is, helmet off. If somebody has a head injury and has a helmet on, leave it on. If they have it off, that's fine. Because he had labored breathing, we removed his chest protector, laid him on his back, and at a minimum, especially if somebody's conscious, but kind of out of it, get them to just focus on the breathing. As I said, all right, buddy, all I want you to do is focus on breathing. Take deep, slow breaths. Lay him on his back, and then bend the feet up. Because with that potential head injury, or possibly going into shock, and because it happened when he stood up, it was that quick lapse of oxygen or blood flow to the head, and that's what made him lightheaded. So we had up forces of blood and oxygen back down to his head. That way, and he was fine. But because the t-shirt, no chest protector on, it was getting late, people from the stands brought blankets, we wrapped him up. Good to go. Fortunately, no problem. You just, mild shock after taking a baseball throw, which would happen to any of us. If you have somebody that is choking, throwing up, anything like that, you're going to want to put them in the traditional recovery position. And what you're going to do is you're going to lay them on their side. That way, anything coming out of the mouth can drain out versus them being on their back and it's, going right back down their throat and creating bigger issues. So as long as you have somebody that's breathing, you put them in this. Also, if they have any suspected back, head, neck injury, leave them as you find them. Because, like we talked about last week, if you have, a kid that's hurt, first thing people do is to try to pick them up. It's that time of year, kids will be out climbing trees and doing all kinds of crazy stuff on skateboards, and you want to keep them as is until rescue gets there. They can put a collar on, put a backboard, and then move them after that. All right, so, as we showed a couple things that you can do just every day to stop the bleeding or stabilize somebody. If you're out and about at a park, driving down the road, at a baseball game, whatever, like I said earlier, don't be that jerk that pulls out a phone. Be a decent human being and at least try to help.
So I think, the most important thing that we talked about in the beginning of our conversation before we went into the gym and did the whole wrap up and practicing on bandaging and things like that. And also, just a real quick shout out to Layla, the owner of Walco Krav Maga and Personal Protection. Thank you so much for being our patient today and letting Marty wrap you up. But I hope our viewers also got an opportunity to learn something from this too. I mean, like you said, don't be a jerk. Don't just sit there. Do something.
Right. Even if all you do is get on the phone, call 911, and relay what you see. Like, hey, this is the mechanism of injury. This is how they got hurt. Let's help each other out. Yep.
Well, Marty, I got nothing else to add to that other than thank you so much for sharing your knowledge yet again with us. And
appreciate it, and have a good one.
Thanks, guys, again for watching Reasonably Tactical. Have a good one.